"Get the hell down, you filthy animal! Face the curb before I blow your head off." The insult landed as the door was ripped open and Elijah Grant was driven into the asphalt, gravel tearing his knees through his slacks. A gun hovered so close it radiated heat, the officer's breath sour with coffee and contempt. "Luxury car! Wrong street!" the sergeant barked. Another parasite who thought he could sneak through here. Elijah laid his hands flat, jaw locked, suit sleeves grinding into dirt, as orders stacked. Kneel, beg, don't look up. Blinds cracked open. They kept shouting, convinced he was powerless, never realizing the man kneeling commanded every badge they wore. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The pre-dawn silence of Maple Ridge Estates stretched across perfect lawns like a blanket. Streetlights cast pale circles on empty sidewalks as Elijah Grant guided his black Mercedes past the identical two-story homes. His tie felt a bit tight, but his hands were steady on the wheel. The dashboard clock read 5:47 a.m. He'd planned this early arrival carefully. Time to settle in, review personnel files, and prepare for his first morning briefing as chief. 20 years of police work had taught him the value of quiet moments before major transitions. The rows of pristine houses blurred past his window. White columns, brick facades, and carefully trimmed hedges. Cookie-cutter affluence that screamed, "exclusive neighborhood." Elijah knew the type well. Places where certain people were expected to have a reason to be there. His reason was simple. He was their new police chief, whether they liked it or not. The gated entrance to Birchwood Drive loomed ahead, its decorative ironwork gleaming. Elijah slowed, checking his mirrors out of habit. That's when he saw them. Patrol lights erupting in his rear view, painting the pre-dawn street in angry reds and blues. His stomach tightened, but his expression didn't change. He signaled and pulled to the curb, positioning his car where the streetlight would illuminate the interior. Both hands moved to the top of the steering wheel, visible and still. Two officers approached aggressively, weapons already drawn. The taller one, Sergeant Brock Harlan, according to his nameplate, took the lead with his gun pointed directly at Elijah's head. Officer Devin Rudd flanked the passenger side, his stance tense and eager. "Hands where I can see them," Harlan bellowed, though Elijah's hands were already perfectly placed on the wheel. "Don't move!" "My hands are visible, officer," Elijah said calmly. "I'm headed to the station." "Shut up!" Harlan cut him off. "We got calls about a suspicious black male in a luxury vehicle casing homes in this neighborhood." Elijah noticed movement in his peripheral vision. A jogger had stopped at the corner, phone raised. Across the street, a woman stepped onto her porch, also recording. Perfect. Witnesses. "I'm not casing anything." Elijah kept his voice level. "I'm actually—" "Exit the vehicle slowly." Harlan's voice dripped with contempt. "Keep those hands up where we can see them." Elijah complied precisely, movements smooth and deliberate. The morning air felt cool on his face as he stepped out. His tailored suit caught the streetlight. Charcoal gray wool, crisp white shirt, blue silk tie. Not exactly typical burglar attire. "Turn around! Face the car!" Harlan grabbed Elijah's shoulder roughly, fingers digging in. "There's no need for—" Elijah started. "I said shut up!" Harlan jerked him forward, slamming him against the Mercedes hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. "You picked the wrong neighborhood to case, boy." More curtains twitched in nearby windows. More phones appeared, recording. Elijah forced himself to breathe slowly, steadily. He'd been here before. The performance of power, the casual cruelty, the audience of comfortable people watching safely from behind glass. "Step back from the car," Harlan ordered, yanking Elijah's arm. "Toward the grass, now!" Elijah moved as directed, noting details automatically. The way Rudd's gun hand trembled slightly. The growing crowd of onlookers, the specific angle of the porch camera that would have captured everything so far. "Get down on your knees," Harlan commanded, shoving Elijah toward the immaculate lawn. A child's voice carried clearly from across the street. "Mommy, why are they making him beg?" The mother's response was quick and sharp. "Get back inside, now!" Elijah felt the weight of every watching eye. The judgment, the assumptions, the fear that wasn't really fear at all, but something darker, something that needed him on his knees to feel safe in their perfect suburban bubble. "I said kneel!" Harlan's voice rose, tight with frustration at Elijah's measured compliance. "Now!" Rudd edged closer, his gun inches from Elijah's head. The metal would be cool, Elijah knew. He could almost feel it against his skin, but he kept his breathing steady, his movements calm and precise. They wanted him to react, to give them an excuse. He wouldn't. The grass was wet with dew against his legs as Harlan forced him down. The sergeant's hand pressed heavily on his shoulder, making a show of dominance for their audience. Elijah could smell fresh-cut grass and gunmetal, could hear the soft whir of phones recording, could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching this piece of street theater from behind their pristine windows. "This is what happens," Harlan announced loudly, clearly playing to his audience, "when people who don't belong here try to cause trouble in our neighborhood." Rudd shifted nervously, weapons still trained on Elijah's head. The young officer's excitement had an edge of uncertainty now, as if something about this scene wasn't playing out quite the way he'd expected. The morning sun was just starting to peek over the roof lines, catching the dew on the perfect lawn where Elijah knelt. Another day in Maple Ridge Estates was beginning. Behind curtains and windows, people who would later claim they saw nothing watched intently, absorbing every detail of this lesson in what their neighborhood was, and wasn't supposed to be. Elijah's knees pressed into the damp grass, his palms open and steady at shoulder height. Each breath came slow and measured, despite the weight of Harlan's hand grinding into his shoulder. Morning dew soaked through his suit pants, Italian wool that cost more than these officers probably made in a week. See how cooperative they get when they know they're caught? Harlan projected his voice like an actor on stage, playing to his suburban audience. His swagger had the practiced ease of someone used to performing this particular show. The neighbors watched from their manicured lawns and pristine porches. Some held phones up openly, others peered through blinds, all of them silent witnesses to this morning's entertainment. Tessa Caldwell stood on her front porch in a blue bathrobe, smartphone steady in her hands. She'd been about to leave for her morning run when the patrol lights lit up the street. Now she couldn't look away from the scene unfolding on her usually quiet block. "Ma'am!" Harlan barked at her suddenly, making her jump. "Get back inside! This is a police matter!" Tessa flinched, but didn't move, her finger still on the record button. Something felt wrong about this stop. The man on his knees was wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. His car was spotless, high-end, and his calm demeanor didn't match Harlan's aggressive theatrics. "I said get inside!" Harlan's voice cracked with authority. "Or you'll be interfering with police business." This time, Tessa retreated, but only to her doorway. She kept recording through the glass storm door, her hands trembling slightly but the camera steady. Elijah's eyes moved methodically, cataloging details. Birchwood Drive street sign, house numbers 1422 and 1425, visible in his peripheral vision. The jogger who'd stopped was now talking rapidly into his phone. The patrol car's dash cam had a clear view of everything, assuming it was actually running. Rudd shifted his weight, gun still aimed at Elijah's head, but his confidence seemed to be wavering. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cool morning air. Harlan leaned down close to Elijah's ear, his voice dropping to a taunting whisper. "Now you understand how things work in this neighborhood, right? This is what happens to people who don't know their place. The sergeant's breath smelled like stale coffee and mint gum. His badge caught the rising sunlight, number 647 gleaming gold against dark blue uniform. Good neighborhoods like this, Harlan continued, clearly enjoying himself, they stay good because we make sure certain elements know they're not welcome here, no matter what kind of car they're driving or suit they're wearing. Elijah remained perfectly still, watching Harlan's face. The sergeant's smirk grew wider with each word, his sense of power and control reaching its peak. This was the moment when they felt most certain, most untouchable. "I'm Elijah Grant," he said clearly, voice carrying across the quiet street. "I'm your new police chief." The effect was instant. Harlan's smirk froze, then cracked like thin ice. His hand jerked away from Elijah's shoulder, as if burned. Rudd's gun dipped, then snapped back up, his eyes wide with sudden uncertainty. "You're—" Harlan's voice trailed off. The swagger vanished, replaced by something closer to panic. "My appointment letter is on the passenger seat," Elijah said calmly, "along with my badge and credentials. Feel free to verify." Harlan lunged for the car door, movements jerky and desperate now. Papers rustled as he snatched Elijah's phone and the letter, eyes scanning frantically. His face drained of color. "Ah! Dispatch," he barked into his radio, voice suddenly professional and polite. "Need to confirm something. The new chief, he was supposed to start today, correct? Now?" Elijah slowly lowered his hands, brushing grass from his knees as he stood. His movements remained deliberate, non-threatening. "Officer Rudd," he said quietly, "you can lower your weapon now." Rudd's gun dropped instantly, his face flushed red with embarrassment or fear or both. "I'll need both your names and badge numbers for my report," Elijah continued in the same measured tone. "Though I suppose I already have yours, Sergeant Harlan. Number 647, correct?" Harlan was still clutching Elijah's phone and papers, his previous confidence shattered. "Sir, this was clearly a misunderstanding. We had reports of suspicious activity in the area and—" "Badge number, Officer Rudd?" Elijah interrupted smoothly. 823, sir," Rudd stammered. The radio crackled. "Confirmed, Unit 4. Chief Grant's start date is today. Do you need any other information?" "Negative. Dispatch," Harlan replied quickly, trying to salvage some semblance of professional tone. "Just a routine verification. Everything's fine here." Elijah noted the growing horror on both officers' faces as the full impact of their actions began to sink in. The witnesses who'd recorded everything, the dash-cam footage, the new chief of police, forced to his knees on his first day, in full view of the community he was meant to protect and serve. "My phone and papers, please, Sergeant," Elijah said, holding out his hand. Through the cruiser's window, Elijah watched the pristine houses of Maple Ridge slide past like a suburban slideshow. Each property looked carefully maintained, matching mailboxes, regulation height hedges, and lawns mowed in perfect diagonal stripes. From the back seat, he noticed how Harlan drove with one hand draped over the wheel, taking corners too fast, running stop signs like they were optional suggestions. The morning sun caught the gold wedding band on Harlan's finger as he adjusted the rearview mirror, angling it to watch Elijah. His earlier panic had settled into something harder, more calculated. "Beautiful neighborhood, isn't it, Chief?" Harlan's voice dripped with false courtesy. "Very exclusive, very particular about who belongs here." Elijah met his eyes in the mirror but didn't respond. He'd seen this pattern before. The subtle threats wrapped in polite small talk, the territorial marking disguised as friendly conversation. The station came into view, a modern building of glass and stone, designed to project authority while fitting into Maple Ridge's upscale aesthetic. Harlan pulled into a reserved spot near the entrance, engine idling. "Welcome home," he said with a smirk, finally unlocking the doors. Inside, The lobby bustled with morning shift change. Conversations died as Elijah entered, replaced by stares and whispers. Officers, who moments ago had been laughing over coffee, now stood straighter, uncertain how to handle this disruption to their routine. Captain Lyle Mercer descended the main stairs like he was stepping onto a stage. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his smile practiced and professional. Everything about him screamed respectable authority figure, exactly the kind of image Maple Ridge wanted to project. "Chief Grant," Mercer called out, extending his hand. "I cannot apologize enough for this morning's unfortunate miscommunication. I've already been briefed on the situation." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his tone carefully calibrated to sound concerned without admitting fault. This was a man used to managing perceptions. "I'd like to review the footage immediately," Elijah said, keeping his voice neutral. Both dashcam and body cams. A flicker of something, annoyance, worry, crossed Mercer's face before his smile reset. "Of course, though I'm afraid we've had some technical difficulties this morning. System glitch affected several units during that time window. We're looking into it." Elijah glanced at Harlan's chest, where his body cam sat dark and silent. "Your cameras seem to be malfunctioning now, Sergeant." Harlan touched the device with exaggerated surprise. "Must have caught that same glitch, sir." "Technology, right?" Deputy Chief Nora Velez appeared at Elijah's side, her arrival so quiet he hadn't noticed her approach. She was tall, with steel-gray hair pulled back severely, and eyes that had seen too much to trust easily. "Chief Grant," she said, her handshake brief but firm. "Let me show you around while IT addresses these technical issues." As they walked the hallways, Velez pointed out different departments with brisk efficiency. But her real communication came in subtle gestures, a slight head tilt toward the evidence room's multiple security cameras, a pause near file cabinets with fresh scratch marks around the locks, a meaningful glance at officers who suddenly needed to check their phones when Elijah passed. The morning roll call was held in a large briefing room, rows of chairs facing a podium. Elijah stood at the front, studying faces as officers filed in. Some met his eyes directly, others found sudden interest in their notebooks. The room felt charged with unspoken tension. "Good morning," he began, his voice carrying to the back row. "As you've likely heard, there was an incident during my arrival today. Let me be clear about changes taking effect immediately. All body cams will be functional and activated during every citizen interaction. Weekly audits will be conducted. The complaint review backlog will be cleared, and there will be zero tolerance for selective enforcement or evidence mishandling." The room split like a fault line. Younger officers sat straighter, some nodding slightly. Veterans exchanged dark looks. In the back, Harlan crossed his arms, his stance radiating defiance. Mercer stepped forward smoothly, clapping his hands once. "An excellent start, Chief. And perfect timing. Mayor Ketter is here for your welcome photos. Nothing says fresh start like a united front, right?" His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The mayor waited in the hallway, already camera-ready in a power suit and practiced smile. Her handshake was warm, but her eyes were calculating, assessing whether Elijah would be an asset or liability to her carefully managed image. "Just a few shots for the local papers," Mercer said, positioning himself between Elijah and the mayor. "Show everyone that Maple Ridge's finest stand together." Elijah nodded, understanding the game. Every flash of the camera was evidence, every forced smile a record. Public attention could cut both ways. As they walked toward Mercer's office afterward, Deputy Chief Velez brushed past him. Her movement was casual, but Elijah felt paper pressed into his palm. He waited until he was alone to read the carefully folded note. That stop wasn't random. They were told to do it. The sunset painted Maple Ridge's identical houses in shades of orange and purple As Elijah Grant entered his temporary rental home, the house felt hollow, barely furnished with basics from the department's relocation service. He caught his reflection in the entryway mirror while loosening his tie. A dark bruise was spreading across his collarbone where Harlan had grabbed him that morning. A soft knock at the door made him pause. Through the peephole, he saw Deputy Chief Nora Velez standing on his porch, clutching a worn manila folder to her chest. Her eyes scanned the street continuously, like someone used to watching their back. "Sorry to arrive unannounced," she said, when he opened the door. "But some conversation shouldn't happen at the station." Elijah ushered her into his sparse living room. A single lamp cast long shadows across moving boxes he hadn't unpacked yet. Nora declined his offer of coffee, instead spreading documents across his kitchen counter with efficient movements. "I've been keeping these at home," she explained, her voice low despite them being alone. "Started making copies years ago when files began disappearing. Complaint summaries, informal reports, notes from concerned officers who've since transferred out." Elijah studied the papers, dozens of incident reports, all following a pattern. Traffic stops concentrated around HOA zones, harassment complaints that vanished from official records, witness statements that went nowhere. "Look at the addresses," Nora pointed to a series of locations. "They target specific streets, ones near the fancy developments or country club. Anyone who doesn't fit their idea of who belongs here." She pulled out more papers, these ones showing dropped charges and dismissed cases. "They're smart about it. Make the stop, create fear, then usually drop charges later. But the message is sent. Most residents are too scared to file formal complaints anymore." Elijah nodded, remembering the faces watching from windows that morning. "How deep does this go?" "Deeper than just bad cops," Nora said. "Town council, HOA boards, business owners, they all benefit from keeping certain people out, making them feel unwelcome." She glanced at his bruise. "Or putting them in their place." Elijah reached for his phone, scrolling to find a number he'd researched before taking the job. Reverend Samuel Boyd had been leading his congregation in Maple Ridge for over 30 years. If anyone knew the community's true pulse, it would be him. As the phone rang, Nora organized the documents into neat piles. "Be careful who you trust, Chief. Even the ones who seem helpful might be reporting back." The Reverend answered on the third ring, his voice deep and steady. "Reverend Boyd speaking." "Reverend, this is Chief Grant. I was hoping we could meet somewhere private to discuss community concerns." "Ah, yes. I heard about your welcome this morning." There was a weight of understanding in his tone. "My church has a side office. Very quiet, very discreet." Before Elijah could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. The image made his jaw tighten. A high-resolution photo of him kneeling on the curb that morning. The angle was perfect, professional, captured from a position no casual neighbor could have managed. The caption read, "We can make you kneel again." A second message followed immediately with his rental address, down to the house number. Nora saw his expression change. "What is it?" He showed her the messages. Her face hardened. "That's not from a patrol camera or bystander. That's surveillance quality." "They're letting me know they have eyes everywhere," Elijah said, his voice controlled despite the anger building in his chest. He turned back to his phone call. "Reverend, would tomorrow evening work?" They arranged a meeting time as Nora gathered her documents. Before leaving, she paused at the door. "They'll try to isolate you first, then discredit you. Then—" She didn't finish the sentence. Alone again, Elijah moved through the house methodically, checking windows and doors. The threatening texts weren't just intimidation. They were a message that the corruption went beyond rogue officers. This was about power structures, about who controlled this carefully manicured suburb's true face. He sat at his kitchen table, making notes in a fresh notebook. Step 1. Identify potential allies in the department. Officers who might be tired of looking the other way. Step 2. Begin implementing reforms that seemed reasonable on paper, but would expose patterns when properly documented. Step 3. Gather evidence quietly, building a case that couldn't be buried in missing paperwork. From his briefcase, he removed a small electronic device, a personal recorder designed to look like a typical pen. He'd purchased it after accepting the job, suspecting he might need backup documentation. As he installed a fresh battery, his thumb brushed over the activation switch. The night pressed against his windows, the street outside too quiet. Somewhere in this neighborhood, someone was watching his house, reporting his movements. They thought they'd hired a token figure, someone they could control through fear and isolation. Elijah checked the recorder's functionality, speaking softly into the silence of his kitchen. You wanted a symbol. You hired a storm. The next morning's darkness clung to Maple Ridge like a stubborn shadow. Elijah Grant pulled into the police station parking lot at 5:45 a.m., his headlights cutting through wisps of early fog. Deputy Chief Nora Velez waited by the side entrance, 2 coffee cups in hand, her expression tense but controlled. You're going to need this, she said, handing him a steaming cup. Word's already spreading about your audit plans. They walked through empty corridors, their footsteps echoing off institutional tile. The night shift officers glanced up as they passed, some nodding respectfully, others suddenly finding their paperwork fascinating. Elijah noticed how the morning crew started filtering in early. Unusual for this hour, but they were curious about their new chief's moves. In his office, Elijah spread out the initial audit documents while Nora closed the door. I've flagged the most suspicious patterns, she said, pointing to highlighted sections. Camera malfunctions that coincide with complaint times. Patrol logs with missing hours. Incident reports that contradict witness statements. Let's start with body cam compliance, Elijah said, logging into the department system. Every working camera, every active officer. Captain Lyle Mercer appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned, his smile practiced and gleaming. Chief Grant, good morning. I see you're diving right in. Captain, I'll need access to the equipment logs and maintenance records. Of course, of course. Mercer's tone was helpful, but his eyes were calculating. I'll have records process that request. Might take a few days. Standard procedure, you understand. The records are digital, Captain. Access should be immediate. True, but proper channels matter. Mercer's smile didn't waver, especially with such a thorough review. We want everything by the book. Throughout the morning, Elijah hit similar walls. Request forms disappeared into administrative black holes. Computer permissions required multiple authorizations. Even basic patrol data needed committee review before release. At 11:30, his phone buzzed with a message from Mayor Diane Ketter's office. The mayor requests your presence at Town Hall, 12:15 p.m. Select council members and community leaders will attend. The conference room gleamed with polished wood and artificial warmth. Ketter sat at the head of the table, surrounded by council members in business attire and HOA presidents with perfect manicures. Their welcome smiles didn't reach their eyes. Chief Grant, Ketter began, we're so pleased to have this opportunity for a proper introduction. Maple Ridge is a special community. Delicate. Built on certain standards. A council member, Anderson, according to his nameplate, nodded earnestly. Property values here reflect careful management, strict zoning, proper enforcement of community guidelines. We've worked hard to maintain order, another added, a woman wearing an HOA president badge. Our residents expect a certain level of protection. Elijah noted how they avoided specific terms, wrapping their meaning in careful phrases. I believe in protection through transparency, he said. Community trust requires accountability. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Smiles tightened around the edges. Chief, Mayor Ketter leaned forward, her voice honey-coated steel. We selected you for your experience, your unique perspective. But rapid changes could create unnecessary tension. Unrest. Unrest, Elijah repeated carefully. Like requiring officers to keep their cameras on? Or processing citizen complaints properly? Now, Anderson cut in. Let's not get adversarial. We're all on the same side here. Are we? Elijah met each gaze around the table. Because I'm on the side of equal protection under law. No exceptions, no special treatment, no buried reports. Ketter's smile became brittle. Perhaps you misunderstand Maple Ridge's needs. We have a delicate balance here, a carefully maintained peace. Peace isn't the same as justice, Mayor. The meeting ended shortly after. Pleasantries stretched thin over obvious warnings. As Elijah walked out, Captain Mercer fell into step beside him. That could have gone smoother, Mercer said quietly. The Council has emergency review powers over department leadership. They can vote on your position if they feel you're moving too aggressively. The threat was clear. They'd hired Elijah as a symbol, a diversity checkbox to deflect criticism. Actually exercising authority wasn't part of the deal. The autumn afternoon had turned gray and cool by the time Elijah left Town Hall. He walked toward his car, mind already planning countermoves, when he noticed something wrong with the vehicle's profile. All 4 tires lay flat against the pavement, clean knife cuts visible in the sidewalls. Professional work, not random vandalism. A patrol car cruised past, rolling slowly enough for Elijah to see Harlan behind the wheel. The sergeant's face showed nothing as he watched Elijah standing beside his disabled vehicle, but his message was clear. Consequences had begun. Under the harsh glow of the street lamp, Elijah studied the clean, professional cuts in his tires. No random slashes or anger marks. This was calculated intimidation. He pulled out his phone and dialed for a tow truck, documenting the damage with photos from multiple angles. Nora's sedan pulled up 15 minutes later, her headlights cutting through the growing darkness. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, she said, as Elijah got in. Good, Elijah replied. The more obvious they are, the easier to prove patterns. Back at the station, Elijah strode straight to his office, Nora following close behind. He pulled up the department's personnel directory on his computer and clicked through to the tech division. We need Jasper Hale, he said. Young officer, works in IT. Clean record, no connections to Harlan's Circle. Nora nodded. Smart choice. He's been here less than a year. Not enough time to be corrupted. 20 minutes later, Jasper entered the office, looking nervous but determined. He was barely in his mid-20s, with quick eyes and restless hands that spoke of too many energy drinks. Officer Hale, Elijah said, I need a complete digital audit. Every traffic stop for the past 3 years. Cross-reference with civilian complaints, focusing on HOA zones and delivery routes. Sir, Jasper glanced at the door, then lowered his voice. Some of those records might be altered. I know. That's why I need original server logs, backup drives, anything that might still have unmodified data. While Jasper got to work, Nora led Elijah down to the basement. She unlocked a heavy door marked Archives and flipped on flickering fluorescent lights. The room smelled of old paper and dust. They didn't manage to destroy everything, she said, moving to a back corner. Some officers, good ones who left or were pushed out, they made copies, kept records just in case someone finally wanted the truth. They spent the next 2 hours sorting through files. The pattern emerged like a dark photograph developing. Black delivery drivers stopped repeatedly near HOA zones, contractors pulled over leaving job sites, visiting relatives questioned for suspicious behavior. Citations issued, then mysteriously dropped after victims were sufficiently scared. Body cam footage missing during key incidents, always involving the same group of officers centered around Harlan. Look at this, Nora said, holding up a complaint form. Delivery driver for Maxwell Foods. Stopped 3 times in 1 week by Harlan's team. 4th time, they found drugs in his truck. He lost his job, his license, then all charges vanished once he left town. "We need to talk to these people," Elijah said. "Get statements, build cases." Nora shook her head. "They're terrified, Elijah. The retaliation is too clever. Someone files a complaint, suddenly they're drowning in code violations. Their kids get pulled over every day. Anonymous calls to their employers about concerns. The HOAs find violations that didn't exist before. It's death by 1,000 cuts." Elijah pulled out his phone and dialed Reverend Samuel Boyd's number. The pastor answered on the 2nd ring. "Reverend, I need your help. Can we meet tomorrow morning at the church? People trust you, feel safe there. We need witnesses to start talking." "Of course," Boyd replied, his voice steady and sure. "Early, before services. 7 a.m.? We'll be there." As they climbed back upstairs, Captain Mercer's voice echoed from the break room, addressing a group of officers. "Important to maintain department unity in these challenging times. Some might mistake necessary changes for hostility toward law enforcement." Elijah paused to listen, jaw tightening. Mercer was already spinning the narrative, painting accountability as an attack on police. In his office, Jasper had filled 2 screens with data columns. "Chief, I found something. When they purged complaints, they forgot about automatic backup logs. I can reconstruct most of the deleted records." "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week. I'll have to write some custom scripts." "Do it, but back up everything off-site first." "And Jasper?" Elijah met the young officer's eyes. "Watch your back. They'll notice what you're doing." "Yes, sir." Jasper straightened. "I'm tired of looking the other way." Near midnight, Elijah finally headed for his car, the rental he'd picked up after the tow. His phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from an unlisted number. He played it on speaker. Heavy breathing filled the silence, then a whispered threat. "Next time, we don't let you stand back up." He saved the message, adding it to his growing evidence file. The threat wasn't surprising, but its desperation was revealing. They were scared of what he might find. Good. Fear made people sloppy, and sloppy meant mistakes. The empty parking lot felt exposed, shadows stretching between pools of security lighting. But Elijah took his time walking to his car, movements deliberate and unhurried. Let them watch. Let them see that threats wouldn't make him flinch or rush or look over his shoulder. They wanted him afraid, which meant fear was their weakness, not his. Elijah's phone buzzed as he stepped out of Reverend Boyd's church into the bright afternoon sun. The morning meeting had been tense but productive. Residents sharing stories in whispers, decades of fear finally finding voice. When he saw AJ's name on the screen, his nephew's shaky tone sent him moving before the words fully registered. "Uncle Elijah, these cops, they got me against their car. I didn't do anything, I swear." "Where exactly?" Elijah was already climbing into his vehicle, Nora Velas quickly following his lead. "Maple Grove, near Wilson Street. By those big houses with the columns." "Stay calm. Keep your hands visible. We're 3 minutes out." Elijah kept AJ on speaker as they drove, listening to the background noise of officers demanding answers about suspicious activity. Through the phone, he heard Officer Rudd's voice rise. "Why you running through yards, boy? Got reports of missing packages." "I wasn't running anywhere," AJ answered, strain in his voice, but keeping it steady like Elijah had taught him. "I was walking on the sidewalk from my friend's house." "Sure you were. Empty the bag." Slowly. Elijah and Nora pulled up to find AJ pressed against a patrol car. Rudd and another officer, Matthews, according to his nameplate, dumping the contents of his backpack onto the hood. School books, a water bottle, and basketball shoes scattered across the metal surface. Behind pristine windows and precisely trimmed hedges, faces watched. Some held phones, some whispered behind hands, but none stepped forward. This was entertainment to them, the daily drama of someone else's humiliation. Elijah stepped out of his car, badge visible, movements deliberate. Officers, what's the probable cause for this stop and search? Rudd's posture shifted instantly, that familiar mix of fear and resentment flickering across his face. Chief, we got calls about a suspicious male checking porches. From whom? I'll need those caller details for the report. Anonymous tips. So no verifiable complainant? Elijah moved closer, voice level. And the legal basis for searching his bag? Matthews stepped back slightly, but Rudd's jaw tightened. Subject was acting evasive. By walking on a public sidewalk? Elijah pulled out his phone, opening the department's reporting app. I'll need both your badge numbers and a complete account of what justified this stop. The screech of tires announced Sergeant Harlan's arrival. He emerged from his vehicle with that practiced swagger, taking in the scene like he owned it. Problem here, Chief? Seems like you're interfering with a routine investigation. No interference, Sergeant. Just ensuring proper procedure and documentation. Elijah continued typing into his phone. Though I'm curious why a sergeant responded to a simple pedestrian stop. I monitor all calls in my sector. Harlan's smile didn't reach his eyes, especially when they involve persons of interest. My 17-year-old nephew is a person of interest? Age doesn't preclude criminal behavior. Harlan moved closer, voice dropping. Maybe you're too emotionally invested to see this objectively. Sir. Nora stepped forward, notebook in hand. I'll need statements from both officers about their reasonable suspicion standard. And Sergeant, since you're here, you can explain why you dispatched 2 units for a single pedestrian. A small crowd had gathered now. Joggers suddenly needing water breaks, dog walkers finding fascinating spots to linger. Phones recorded discreetly and not so discreetly. Harlan noticed the attention and shifted tactics. Look, clearly, this was a misunderstanding. He gestured at AJ's scattered belongings. Just doing our job, checking things out. No harm done. No harm? Elijah's voice remained steady, but his eyes locked onto Harlan's. You stopped and searched a minor without cause, created a public spectacle, and violated department policy on reasonable suspicion. That's not no harm. That's a documented incident requiring review. Rudd started shoving AJ's belongings back into the backpack. Suddenly clumsy. Matthews found somewhere else to look. Harlan's smile turned brittle. You're free to go, Harlan told AJ, making it sound like a threat. Consider this a warning about staying where you belong. Oh, he belongs right here, Elijah said quietly. And this stop will be fully investigated, not buried. Nora, please get Officer Rudd and Matthews's statement details. I want their narrative on record before it changes. The gathered crowd began dispersing as Nora collected information and Elijah photographed the scene. AJ stood straight, controlled, but Elijah could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he accepted his backpack without sudden moves. Later that evening, sitting across from each other at Elijah's kitchen table, AJ pushed his food around his plate. The bruise where they'd grabbed his arm was darkening. They knew exactly who I was, he said finally, voice low. Called me Chief's boy when you couldn't hear. Said I should tell you to watch yourself. Look at me. Elijah waited until AJ met his eyes. They wanted you scared. I know. AJ straightened slightly. That's why you're documenting everything, right? Building a case? Then we make them accountable. Out loud. The fluorescent lights of the Maple Ridge Community Center cast harsh shadows across the packed gymnasium. Fold-out tables lined the walls, laden with neighborhood watch pamphlets and Support Your Police merchandise. Mayor Diane Ketter worked the crowd with practiced charm, her camera-ready smile never wavering as she posed between Captain Lyle Mercer and a row of crisp uniforms. Elijah Grant stood near the back, watching, He noted how Brock Harlan moved through the space like a local celebrity, accepting handshakes and backslaps from residents who clearly saw him as their personal protector. The same residents who'd watched silently that morning as AJ was harassed on their perfect sidewalks. "Great turnout," Mercer said, materializing at Elijah's side. "Shows how much this community values law enforcement. The right kind of law enforcement." Elijah kept his expression neutral. "Every kind of law enforcement should value accountability." "Still pushing that?" Mercer's smile tightened. "After today's unfortunate incident with your nephew? Some might question your judgment when family's involved." The threat was clear, but Elijah had expected it. He'd seen how they operated now, using public spaces to perform authority while dealing out private punishments. AJ stood across the room, maintaining composure despite the sideways glances and whispered comments. He'd insisted on coming, refusing to be invisible. Now he caught Elijah's eye and gestured that he needed some air. Elijah watched his nephew slip out the side door. Then he noticed Officer Rudd, out of uniform but unmistakable, following with two men he recognized from town council meetings, regular fixtures at police fundraisers, and Back the Blue rallies. "Excuse me," Elijah said to Mercer, already moving. The night air was thick with humidity. As Elijah rounded the building's corner, he heard voices before he saw them, harsh, mocking tones that set off every alarm in his mind. "Look who thinks he belongs here," Rudd was saying, his off-duty swagger enhanced by liquid courage. "The chief's pet project." AJ stood with his back to the wall, shoulders square despite being surrounded. The two men with Rudd, middle-aged, prosperous-looking in their polo shirts and expensive watches, crowded closer. "Maybe you need another lesson about staying in your place," one of them slurred, jabbing a finger toward AJ's chest. "Back away," Elijah's voice cut through the darkness. "Now!" Instead of retreating, the man closest to AJ shoved hard, sending him stumbling. "Or what, Chief? Gonna cry racism again?" Elijah moved forward, measured steps eating up the distance. "Last warning. Step back and walk away." The first punch came from the left, telegraphed by an amateur's wild swing. It clipped Elijah's jaw, more insulting than damaging. He absorbed the impact, letting his training take over. The attacker pressed forward, expecting Elijah to crumble. Instead, Elijah stepped inside his reach, used the man's momentum against him, and dropped him with a precise combination of moves that left him gasping on the pavement. The second man charged like a bull, all rage and no technique. Elijah redirected him smoothly, pinning him against the wall with controlled pressure on his shoulder and wrist. "Don't," Elijah warned, as the man struggled. Rudd lunged from the side, probably hoping to claim Elijah had attacked an officer. But Elijah had been watching for it. He shifted his weight, caught Rudd's arm, and used the officer's own forward motion to introduce him to the brick wall, firmly enough to stop the attack, carefully enough to leave no lasting damage. "Phone out! Recording everything!" called a woman's voice from the doorway. Tessa Caldwell stood there, arm steady as she documented the scene. She'd been one of the silent observers during AJ's morning harassment. Not anymore. Elijah kept his voice calm, professional. "AJ, you okay?" "Yes, sir." AJ's voice was steady. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Right on cue, Brock Harlan emerged from the shadows into the security light's glare. His face split into a predatory grin as he surveyed the scene. 3 men sprawled or staggering, the chief standing over them, multiple witnesses arriving. Harlan's expression said it all. This was exactly what they'd wanted. A chance to paint Elijah as the aggressor, the angry black man they could finally justify removing. The fact that he'd defended himself and his nephew with minimal force wouldn't matter in their version of events. But Harlan hadn't counted on Tessa's phone, still recording. or the other devices that had appeared in doorways and windows, capturing truth that couldn't be buried in missing paperwork or convenient system glitches. The sirens grew louder, as Harlan's grin promised consequences. He thought he was watching Elijah's career end. He was wrong. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. as Elijah eased his car into his rental's driveway. His jaw throbbed where the punch had landed, and his shoulders ached from the controlled takedowns. He'd spent 3 hours giving statements, watching Rudd and his drinking buddies try to twist self-defense into assault. His phone buzzed before he could get out of the car. Nora Velez's name flashed on the screen. "They're moving fast," she said without preamble. "Mercer's already got his version spreading. Says you attacked Rudd without provocation, used excessive force on civilians." Elijah pressed his fingertips against his temples. "We have witnesses. Phone footage. They're working on the witnesses now. Tessa Caldwell already got 3 visits from code enforcement about violations on her property. The others are getting similar pressure." "Document everything," Elijah said. "Every visit, every sudden citation. Already on it." But that's not all. Mayor Ketter called an emergency town hall for tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. sharp. They're pushing hard on this, Chief. Elijah finally left his car, muscles protesting as he climbed the porch steps. Of course they are. They think they've got their angle now. The aggressive chief who can't control his temper. What's your play? Give them exactly what they don't expect. Complete calm. And data. Lots of it. The next morning, Maple Ridge Town Hall's meeting room was packed by 9:45. The wood-paneled walls and leather chairs couldn't hide the tension crackling through the space. Mayor Ketter sat centered at the raised council table, wearing concern-like designer perfume. Elijah moved to the podium when called. Ignoring the whispers, he placed his materials carefully. Stop data analysis, complaint patterns, camera compliance rates. His bruised jaw drew stares, but he kept his posture relaxed, professional. "We're here," Mayor Ketter began, "because of growing concerns about department morale and community trust under Chief Grant's leadership style." The word choice was deliberate. Leadership style, not assault allegations. They were playing a longer game. Elijah looked directly at the crowd. "I'd like to present some findings from my initial department review. This isn't really the forum for—" Ketter started. "Actually, it's exactly the forum." Elijah's voice carried without raising. Public oversight of public servants. He displayed his first chart. Traffic stops clustered around HOA zones, targeting patterns clear as fingerprints. In the past year, Black and Hispanic drivers were 9 times more likely to be stopped in these neighborhoods. 90% of those stops showed no probable cause. Howard Matthews, head of the largest HOA, stood up. "We have standards in our communities. Safety concerns." "Safety?" Elijah repeated evenly. "Like forcing a police chief to kneel at gunpoint? Like surrounding a teenager 3-to-1 behind a community center? That's exactly the kind of inflammatory rhetoric." Mercer rose smoothly from his seat near the mayor. "Chief Grant seems determined to create division where none existed. Our department has served this community with respect and professionalism for years." "Respect," Elijah said, "doesn't selectively delete body cam footage. Professionalism doesn't make evidence disappear." He showed his next slide. Gaps in camera coverage, missing complaint files, all coinciding with specific officers and locations. The room erupted in overlapping voices. HOA members talked about property values and outside agitators. Council members frowned about rushed conclusions. Mercer spoke at length about morale and tradition, each word polished to a shine. Elijah stood steady. "The law isn't a popularity contest. It's not meant to comfort those with power. It's meant to protect everyone equally." "Perhaps," Mayor Ketter cut in, "we should table this discussion until tempers cool." The meeting dissolved into small clusters, people choosing sides with their bodies, who they stood near, who they avoided. Elijah gathered his materials, noting who watched him and how. A tall officer approached, wearing his uniform like armor. "Chief, could we speak privately?" They found a quiet corner. The officer glanced around before speaking. "I was there when Mercer gave the order about your first day. Told them to make an impression at the gate. I've got proof. Texts, recorded conversation." "Why tell me now?" "Because it's getting worse. They're not just harassing people anymore. There's money involved. Seizures that never get logged. I can testify, but—" He lowered his voice further. "I need protection. My family needs protection." Elijah studied him carefully. "We can arrange that. Meet me tonight, 8 p.m., at the diner on Roosevelt. Bring what you have." The officer nodded quickly. "Thank you, sir. Really." As Elijah walked toward the parking lot, movement caught his eye. The would-be whistleblower stood near a column, watching Captain Mercer load papers into his car. Their eyes met for just a moment before the officer looked away. Fast. Guilty. The gesture was familiar to Elijah. He'd seen it before, in other departments. The look of someone who'd already made their choice, already picked their side, already decided whose protection mattered more. The coffee shop's evening crowd thinned as Elijah Grant chose a corner table with clear sight lines to both exits. Officer James Wilson, the supposed whistleblower, was already 10 minutes late. Through the window, Elijah spotted Nora Velez pretending to read a newspaper at an outdoor table, positioned to watch the parking lot. Wilson finally pushed through the door at 8:12 p.m., still in uniform, scanning the room like someone expecting trouble. He carried a thin manila envelope that looked deliberately weathered. "Sorry I'm late, Chief," Wilson said, sliding into the seat. Had to shake any tails. He kept his voice low, playing the part of the nervous informant perfectly. "Understandable," Elijah replied, noting how Wilson's eyes darted to the entrance each time the bell chimed. "You mentioned having evidence about Captain Mercer." Wilson pulled out his phone, thumbing through text messages. "Yeah, look at this chain from the morning you arrived. Mercer telling us to greet you at the gate, making jokes about putting you in your place." The texts looked genuine enough, but something felt off about their timing. Too neat, too perfectly incriminating. Wilson leaned forward, dropping his voice further. "There's more. The seizure money I mentioned. They've got a whole system. Certain stops, certain neighborhoods. The cash disappears before it hits the evidence room." "How long has this been happening?" Elijah asked, watching Wilson's face. "Months, maybe years. But listen." Wilson glanced around again. "What have you found so far? In your investigation? Any other officers talking?" And there it was, the real purpose of this meeting. Elijah kept his expression neutral. "We're still gathering information. Following proper channels." Wilson pushed the envelope across the table. "These are copies of some key documents. But, Chief, I need to know my family will be protected if I come forward officially. What kind of guarantees can you make?" Through the window, Elijah saw Nora shift slightly, a signal that someone else had arrived. A dark sedan crawled past the coffee shop, moving too slowly. "Of course," Elijah said carefully. "Protection is essential. Let me review these materials first. Then we can discuss next steps through official channels." Wilson's hand tightened on the envelope. "But you'll need my testimony to make sense of them. Maybe we should go over them now?" "I prefer to analyze evidence thoroughly before discussing details," Elijah said, standing. "Thank you for bringing this forward, Officer Wilson. We'll be in touch through proper department channels." Wilson's smile flickered. "Right. Of course." He released the envelope reluctantly. "Just be careful who you trust with this, Chief." Elijah waited until Wilson left, then watched through the window as the dark sedan pulled away 1 minute later. He texted Nora, "Follow the car." Back at the station, Elijah moved fast. He called Jasper Hale to his office, speaking in low tones while running the water in his private bathroom. An old trick to defeat listening devices. "I need everything backed up off-site," he told Jasper. "Stop records, dash cam footage, complaint files, all of it. Can you do it without being traced?" Jasper nodded, already pulling out a laptop. "I've got secure cloud storage ready. Been expecting something like this." "Good man." Elijah picked up his desk phone. "Now we go official." He called the State Oversight Board, formally requesting an external audit based on pattern evidence. The investigator on the night desk sounded interested, especially when Elijah mentioned selective enforcement and missing evidence. They scheduled an intake call for 9 a.m. sharp. For the first time in days, Elijah felt momentum shifting. State involvement would make it harder for Mercer to bury things. The corrupt network would have to be more careful, which meant more chances to catch them slipping. He called home to check on AJ. "I'm fine, Uncle E," AJ said, "just doing homework." "Stay inside tonight," Elijah insisted, "and keep your phone charged." I know. They're not going to try anything else so soon. Humor me." Elijah had just hung up when his cell phone buzzed. Nora. "Wilson went straight to Mercer's house," she reported. "Stayed 20 minutes. Now they're both headed to the station." "Anything else?" "Yeah. The evidence clerk, Paula Martinez. She's not answering her phone. Her car's still in the lot, but no one's seen her for hours." Elijah's chest tightened. He grabbed his keys and badge, already moving. "Meet me at evidence storage. Now." The storage room door was ajar when they arrived, light spilling into the dark hallway. Inside, drawers hung open. File boxes gaped empty. The careful organization from that morning was destroyed, and in the center of the room, Paula Martinez's access card lay broken on the floor. "Call it in," Elijah ordered. "Full investigation, everything by the book. And find Martinez." They found her an hour later, locked in a supply closet 2 floors up, shaken but unhurt. She described 2 masked men who had forced her to unlock the evidence room, then trapped her upstairs. Near midnight, exhausted, Elijah returned to his office. A single piece of paper waited on his desk. His own complaint form from the kneeling stop, stamped in red ink that still looked wet. Unfounded. He picked it up carefully, hearing Nora's footsteps in the doorway behind him. "Martinez is giving her statement now," she said quietly. "But the files are gone. All of them." "Not all," Elijah replied, still staring at the red stamp. "They left us this one." "Which means they're getting sloppy." The red ink on the unfounded stamp hadn't dried completely, smearing slightly under Elijah's thumb. Past midnight, the station felt hollow, each footstep echoing through empty corridors. The sound of running made him look up. Nora Velez burst through his office door, her face tight with urgency. "The access logs," she said, slightly out of breath. "Someone altered them." They erased 2 hours of entries between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m., replaced them with routine patrols. Elijah placed the complaint form carefully on his desk. "Paula Martinez, how is she?" "Shaken, but stable. Giving her statement to Internal Affairs now." Nora closed the door behind her. "She says the men knew exactly what files to take. This wasn't random." "Of course not." Elijah stood, pacing the small office. "They're eliminating evidence before the state team arrives. The whistleblower meeting was just to keep me distracted." Heavy footsteps approached from the hallway. Captain Lyle Mercer appeared in the doorway, his silver hair perfect even at this hour, his smile practiced and cold. "Quite a situation we have here," Mercer said smoothly. "But don't worry. It's being handled." "Handled?" Elijah turned to face him. "A clerk was assaulted. Evidence was stolen. I'm calling state oversight right now." "That won't be necessary." Mercer's smile didn't waver. "This is an internal matter requiring proper procedure. Besides, the mayor has called an emergency council session for dawn." All other actions need to wait until after that meeting. This isn't about procedure, Elijah said. This is obstruction. Careful, Chief. Mercer's voice hardened slightly. Making accusations without evidence. That could be seen as creating a hostile work environment. Nora stepped forward. We have Martinez's statement. From a clerk who was admittedly trapped in a closet for hours? Mercer raised an eyebrow. Hardly reliable. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare my report for the council. After Mercer left, Elijah checked his watch. 12:45 a.m. Go home, Nora. Get some rest. We'll need clear heads in the morning. You should rest too, she said. But her expression said she knew he wouldn't. Elijah drove home first, parking quietly in the driveway. Inside, he found AJ asleep on the couch, history textbook still open on his chest. Elijah carefully removed the book and draped a blanket over his nephew, studying the young man's face. In sleep, AJ looked younger, more vulnerable, a reminder of everything at stake. At 5:30 a.m., Elijah parked near Town Hall. The sun hadn't risen yet, but Reverend Samuel Boyd was already waiting outside, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the street lights. Nora arrived moments later, carrying coffee. Whatever happens in there, Reverend Boyd said quietly, remember, the community stands with you. They're going to try to isolate you, Nora added, handing him a coffee cup. Make you look dangerous. Inside, the council chamber was packed despite the early hour. Camera phones pointed at Elijah as he took his seat. Mayor Diane Ketter sat at the center of the raised dais, her perfectly styled hair and pressed suit a stark contrast to the exhausted faces around her. Thank you all for coming at this difficult hour, Ketter began, unfolding a typed statement. Recent events have forced us to address serious concerns about leadership and safety in our community. She read smoothly, each word calculated. Loss of confidence, deteriorating morale, use of force concerns, community alarm. The phrases blurred together, building a wall of respectability around what was really happening. Captain Mercer took the podium next, his voice grave. 2 nights ago, our chief physically attacked an off-duty officer behind the community center. This follows a pattern of aggressive behavior and departmental disruption that has created an untenable situation. Elijah started to stand, but Nora's hand touched his arm. A warning. This wasn't a hearing. It was theater. Therefore, Mayor Ketter continued, effective immediately, Chief Grant is placed on administrative suspension pending full investigation. During this period, he is barred from entering the police station or accessing any departmental resources. The room erupted in murmurs. Phones kept recording. Elijah remained seated, his face carefully neutral, even as his pulse thundered in his ears. He noticed Wilson, the fake whistleblower, smirking from the back row. Additionally, Ketter said, given the seriousness of these concerns, we've appointed Captain Mercer as acting chief until this matter is resolved. Near 11 a.m., Elijah walked out of Town Hall into harsh sunlight. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. He kept his stride measured, dignified, even as Mercer appeared beside him. The captain leaned close, voice barely a whisper. You'll learn how Maple Ridge trains its chiefs. Afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of Elijah's rental home, casting striped shadows across the living room floor. AJ sat on the couch, his shoulders tense despite his casual posture. Nora Velez stood by the window, occasionally peeking through the slats. Another pass, she muttered, as a patrol car crept by, moving slower than necessary. Third time in an hour. Elijah watched his nephew pretend to focus on his phone. AJ's fingers tapped restlessly on the screen, his jaw tight. You sure you're okay? Elijah asked. I'm fine, Uncle Lee. AJ forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Really? Just homework stress? But Elijah saw the truth in how AJ's gaze kept drifting to the window, in the way he flinched slightly at every passing car. The morning's council meeting had shaken more than just Elijah's position. It had threatened the fragile sense of safety they'd been building. "Mercer's already working the internal channels," Nora said, moving away from the window. "He's calling mandatory briefings, probably spinning the narrative. Anyone who might back your version of events will be isolated, pressured." "What about Paula Martinez?" Elijah asked. "The evidence clerk? Suddenly on administrative leave for a paperwork discrepancy from last month." Nora's voice was bitter. Convenient timing. Elijah pulled out his personal phone, not the department-issued one they could monitor, and dialed the state oversight number. After several transfers and holds, he finally reached investigator Sarah Ramirez. "We can meet tomorrow at 9 a.m., Ramirez said. "Neutral location, the state office building downtown. Bring any documentation you have." "I'll be there," Elijah confirmed, writing down the details. By late afternoon, the kitchen was empty except for some crackers and juice. AJ needed real food, and they couldn't hide in the house forever. "Quick grocery run," Elijah announced. "We'll stay in public spaces, minimize risk." The nearest supermarket was 10 minutes away. They took Elijah's car, with AJ riding shotgun. The store's fluorescent lights and normal activity felt almost surreal after the tension of the day. They filled their cart with basics: bread, milk, pasta, vegetables. AJ started to relax slightly, even joked about Elijah's healthy food choices. The sun was setting as they loaded groceries into the trunk. AJ pushed the cart back while Elijah started the car. Everything felt manageable for a moment. Then red and blue lights exploded in the rearview mirror. Elijah's hands tightened on the wheel as he pulled over carefully. AJ returned and slipped into the passenger seat just as Sergeant Brock Harlan approached, flashlight beams sweeping aggressively across their faces. "License and registration," Harlan demanded, his tone dripping with false authority. "Your brake light's out." Elijah knew his lights were fine. He'd checked them that morning out of habit. He handed over his documents without comment, keeping his movements slow and visible. Harlan studied the paperwork longer than necessary. Then his flashlight beam settled on AJ. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, look who it is. Step out of the vehicle, son." "Why?" Elijah asked calmly. "What's the reason?" "Officer safety," Harlan snapped. "Don't make this difficult." He yanked AJ's door open. AJ looked at Elijah, fear flickering across his face before he masked it. Elijah gave him a slight nod. "Stay calm. We'll handle this." AJ stepped out slowly, hands visible. Harlan roughly spun AJ around, shoving him against the car. Hands on the roof, feet back. His pat-down was aggressive, theatrical. Then he reached into AJ's jacket pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. Elijah's stomach dropped. He'd never seen those pills before, and he knew AJ hadn't either. "Well, well," Harlan announced loudly. "What do we have here? Looks like illegal substances to me." He dangled the bag with exaggerated concern. "Such a shame. Turn around, hands behind your back." "Those aren't mine," AJ protested, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "You know they're not mine." Harlan roughly cuffed him, tightening the metal until AJ winced. "Save it for booking. You have the right to remain silent." Elijah stepped out of the car. "This is a plant, and you know it." "Stay back," Harlan warned, one hand on his weapon. "You're suspended, remember? No interfering with police business." 2 more patrol cars arrived, lights flashing. Curious shoppers gathered at a distance, phones recording. Elijah stood helpless as they put AJ in the back of a cruiser, his nephew's face a mask of forced composure. The drive to the station was a blur of rage and strategy. Elijah parked in the public lot, watching AJ being led inside through the sally port. When he tried to follow through the front entrance, the desk sergeant, one of Mercer's loyal followers, blocked his path. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "You're suspended, sir." No access to the building. Through the glass doors, Elijah caught a glimpse of AJ being escorted down the hallway, his head held high despite the handcuffs. Night had fallen completely now, and the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his nephew's face. The church's side door creaked open into darkness. Reverv. Samuel Boyd ushered Elijah Grant and Nora Velas inside quickly, checking the empty parking lot before locking up behind them. Their footsteps echoed in the silent sanctuary as they made their way to the basement stairs. "Watch your step," Reverend Boyd whispered. "Light switch is at the bottom." Fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing a large meeting room with folding chairs and cork bulletin boards. Coffee makers lined one wall, and a projector screen hung at the front. The space felt safe, separate from Maple Ridge's manicured threats. Elijah's shoulders sagged with exhaustion as he sank into a chair. His phone showed another rejected call to the station. Still no contact with AJ. Nora paced the linoleum floor, her face tight with controlled anger. "Others are coming," Reverend Boyd said, checking his watch. "Trusted people only. They'll use the back entrance." Within 20 minutes, a small group gathered. Tessa Caldwell arrived first, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She'd been recording more than just porches lately. Her camera roll held truth the department couldn't erase. 2 elderly deacons followed, then a retired teacher who'd filed complaints about racial profiling last year. They sat in a loose circle, voices low but determined. "They're using AJ to break you," Nora said bluntly, stopping her pacing. "The timing's too perfect. Right after your suspension, when you can't access the building or intervene officially." Elijah nodded. "Plant drugs, create a record, damage both our credibilities at once. They think if they hurt him enough, I'll either quit or lose control." "Those pills weren't his," Tessa interjected. "Everyone who knows AJ knows that's impossible. He tutors my daughter in calculus, for heaven's sake." "Evidence doesn't matter if they control the narrative," Reverend Boyd said. "They've had years to perfect this playbook." A soft knock interrupted them. Jasper Hale slipped in, carrying a laptop and external drive. The young IT officer looked nervous, but resolute as he sat up at a folding table. "I've been tracking patterns," he said, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Every time Harlan's unit makes a controversial stop, there's a body cam malfunction. The gaps aren't random." He pulled up a calendar view dotted with red markers. "See? Clusters around complaint dates." Nora moved to a corner and returned with her purse. She withdrew a thick manila envelope, sealed with evidence tape. "I started making copies 3 years ago," she said quietly, "after they buried the Thompson family's complaint. Kept everything off-site, dated and notarized." She spread documents across the table. Complaint summaries, patrol logs, internal memos with damning margins notes. Years of paper truth they thought they'd erased. "There's more," Elijah said. He reached into his jacket and produced a small recording device, no larger than a pen. "After the kneeling stop, I knew they'd try to control the narrative. So I started documenting everything. Every meeting, every casual threat in the hallway." Tessa pulled up the original kneeling video on her phone. The image was sharp, damning. Harlan's swagger, the gun at Elijah's head, the casual cruelty of power unchecked. "I have the community center footage too," she added. "Shows exactly who swung first." Reverend Boyd grabbed a notepad. "Okay, let's plan this hour by hour. State oversight meets you at 9 a.m. We need everything copied, secured, and witnessed before then." They divided tasks with quiet efficiency. Jasper would transfer digital files through secure channels. Nora would organize her documents chronologically. Tessa would prepare statement about both videos. The deacons offered to gather more witnesses. Carefully, through trusted networks only. "We need a chain of custody they can't challenge," Elijah said. "Every copy, every transfer documented and time-stamped." His phone lit up with AJ's mugshot. already posted to the department's booking page. They'd rushed it online, wanting maximum exposure. In the photo, AJ stared straight ahead, his young face set in a mask of dignity under harsh booking lights. The sight hit Elijah like a physical blow. His nephew was spending the night in a cell, surrounded by the same men who'd framed him. But AJ's expression in the photo wasn't broken. It was defiant. He was his uncle's blood, after all. Time blurred as they worked. Coffee grew cold in styrofoam cups. Papers rustled. Keyboards clicked. Outside, the sky remained dark, but hints of pre-dawn gray began seeping through basement windows. Close to 3 a.m., Elijah found himself staring at AJ's mugshot again. The familiar rage rose in his chest, but it was different now. Not the hot fury that makes mistakes, but something colder and more focused. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of absolute certainty. They wanted me to beg. Tomorrow, they beg for mercy from the truth. Dawn painted the county building's windows in pale orange as Elijah Grant walked through security. Nora Velez carried a heavy accordion file beside him, while Jasper Hale balanced his laptop and external drives. Reverend Samuel Boyd brought coffee for everyone. They'd need it after the sleepless night. The conference room sat far from public areas, its walls bare except for a state seal. 2 investigators waited inside, Sarah Martinez from the Oversight Division and James Cooper from Internal Affairs. They stood as Elijah's group entered, professional handshakes masking the gravity of the moment. "Thank you for meeting us early," Martinez said, gesturing to the long table. "We understand time is critical, especially with your nephew's situation." Elijah nodded, keeping his voice steady. "Let's start with the pattern." He turned to Jasper. "Show them the stop data first." Jasper connected his laptop to the room's projector. Charts and graphs filled the screen, red dots clustering around specific streets, specific times, specific demographics. "Each point represents a documented stop," he explained. "The gaps show where footage mysteriously fails or reports go missing. But even with deletions, the targeting is clear." Cooper leaned forward, frowning at the data. "How far back does this go?" 3 years of complete logs, Jasper said. Fragments going back 5. Sergeant Harlan's unit shows the highest concentration of equipment failures during stops of minority residents, especially near HOA zones. Nora spread her preserved documents across the table. "These are the original complaints, before they were altered or buried. Notarized copies, stored off-site." She pointed to specific dates. "See how the pattern escalates after each attempted reform?" Martinez examined the papers carefully, comparing dates to Jasper's data. "This shows systemic behavior, not isolated incidents. The coordination suggests command-level involvement." "Captain Mercer orchestrates everything," Elijah said. "He maintains plausible deniability, while Harlan's team handles enforcement. Mayor Ketter provides political cover." He played selected clips from his concealed recorder. Hallway threats, coded warnings, the subtle language of institutional intimidation. Cooper's expression darkened as he listened. "They're not even trying to hide it. They're confident nothing can touch them." "Because nothing has," Reverend Boyd added quietly. "Until now." Tessa's videos came next. The kneeling stop played in sharp detail on the conference room wall. Harlan's performative cruelty, the gun at Elijah's head, the calculated humiliation. The community center footage followed, clearly showing who attacked first. "This is textbook civil rights territory," Martinez said. "But we need more than historical evidence. We need to catch them in a current violation, something they can't bury or explain away." Elijah laid out a map of Maple Ridge. "The annual charity parade is this afternoon. It's Mercer's Pride event, all about image and control. He'll want his trusted officers handling security." "That's not enough," Cooper warned. "We need them to commit a clear violation." "They will," Elijah said. Because I'm going to give them something they can't resist. He outlined his plan. Leak information through a specific dispatcher, known to feed intel to Mercer. Let them think Elijah stored proof of Mercer's direct involvement. The kneeling stop order, documentation of their forfeiture scheme, in a secured locker at the station annex. They'll have to move fast, Nora added. With state oversight involved, they know their window is closing. Martinez nodded slowly. We can have surveillance in place. If they break in, or plant evidence, they will, Elijah said. Mercer's too careful to do it himself, but Harlan and Rudd are predictable. They'll try to finish me before the parade. Make it public, make it hurt. I'll coordinate with the federal civil rights team, Cooper said. They can be nearby, ready to move. He paused. What about your nephew? I filed emergency motions at dawn, Elijah replied, demanding immediate lab testing on those pills, challenging chain of custody, requesting expedited bail review. The more pressure we apply, the more likely they'll make mistakes. They spent the next hour coordinating details, surveillance positions, communication protocols, evidence handling procedures. Martinez made calls to arrange judicial oversight while Cooper worked with federal contacts. Jasper backed up everything to secure servers. Reverend Boyd left to organize community witnesses for when things broke open. Through the conference room windows, they watched Maple Ridge wake up. Sprinklers hissed on perfect lawns. Garbage trucks made their rounds. Parents drove children to school past patrol cars waiting to enforce invisible boundaries. Near 11, Nora received a text from a trusted officer. Mercer had just assigned Harlan and Rudd to parade security detail. Their unit would have full access to the station and annex to ensure public safety. Elijah stood at the window, watching a patrol car cruise past the county building. Good, he murmured. Walk into it. The words carried no satisfaction, no triumph, only the weight of necessary justice. Behind him, investigators finalized positions and protocols. Nora sorted documents for court filings. Jasper triple-checked his digital safeguards. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away shadows across Maple Ridge's manicured streets. In a few hours, the facade of suburban perfection would shatter. But for now, they waited. Evidence ready. Witnesses prepared. Truth poised to break through years of careful lies. Early afternoon sun blazed over Maple Ridge's charity parade route. Red, white, and blue bunting draped pristine storefronts. Children clutched balloons, while parents checked phones and chatted about property values. News cameras captured Mayor Diane Ketter, beaming from a small stage, her cream suit gleaming as she stood beside Captain Lyle Mercer's crisp uniform. Maple Ridge represents the very best of community values, Ketter announced to scattered applause. Our police department ensures we remain a safe, prosperous haven for families. Mercer nodded beside her, scanning the crowd with practiced authority. His radio crackled. Brock Harlan's voice, tense beneath forced calm. Captain, approaching the annex now for security sweep. Behind the scenes, surveillance teams watched Harlan and Devin Rudd pull into the station annex parking lot. Their movements were sharp, hurried. They bypassed normal entry procedures and headed straight for the evidence storage area. The desk clerk, Maria Santos, looked up as they approached. Officers, I'll need to log your department emergency. Harlan cut her off. Step aside. But protocol requires... Rudd leaned over her desk. You want to keep this job? Look away for 5 minutes. Maria's hand trembled as she pressed the door release. State investigators captured everything on multiple cameras. The threats, the forced entry, the violation of evidence protocols. Harlan moved with disturbing familiarity through the storage area, while Rudd stood watch, tension visible in his stance. Here, Harlan muttered, reaching the locker allegedly containing Elijah's evidence. He picked the lock with practiced ease, another violation caught on camera. Inside, he found Elijah's vehicle keys, seized during his suspension. "Plant it," he ordered Rudd, passing him a small bag. "Make it match what we put on the kid." Rudd's hands shook as he tried to attach the planted evidence to the key ring. "Sarge, if this goes wrong—" "Shut up and work," Harlan snapped. "Mercer's got our backs, just like always." That's when the state investigators moved. They emerged from concealed positions, weapons drawn. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" Harlan's face twisted with rage as he reached for his belt. An investigator's voice cut through. "Don't make this worse, Sergeant. You're already facing multiple felonies." Rudd immediately raised his hands, panic breaking through his facade. "Sarge, don't—" Harlan froze, fury warring with self-preservation. Finally, he raised his hands, spitting curses as investigators moved in to cuff them. At the parade route, Mercer's radio crackled with code signals. His expression shifted microscopically as he processed the message. He excused himself from the stage, walking quickly toward the annex, only to find federal agents waiting. "Captain Mercer," Investigator Martinez stepped forward. "We need you to come with us." "This is my jurisdiction," Mercer started, reaching for authority he'd always wielded. Martinez held up a phone, pressed play. Mercer's own voice filled the air. "Teach the new chief how Maple Ridge works. Put him on his knees where everyone can see. Then we clean up the narrative, just like always." Color drained from Mercer's face as the recording continued, laying bare weeks of orchestrated harassment and cover-ups. More agents appeared, forming a subtle barrier between Mercer and escape. Neighbors began noticing, phones rising to record. Hours later, an emergency council session packed town hall. Residents pressed against walls while cameras rolled. Mayor Ketter tried to maintain control. "We're here to address concerning allegations." "Evidence," Elijah corrected firmly, standing at the podium. "Not allegations." The room watched in stunned silence as surveillance footage played on the wall. Harlan and Rudd's break-in. Mercer's recorded orders. Stop data showing years of targeted harassment. Complaint files that vanished when victims sought justice. Tessa Caldwell stood to testify about recording the kneeling stop. Other witnesses followed. The jogger, Maria Santos. Community members describing years of fear. A young officer finally broke ranks, detailing how Mercer's crew enforced silence. Ketter's professional smile cracked as reality crashed through her carefully maintained narrative. She watched helplessly as federal agents led Mercer out in handcuffs, followed by Harlan and Rudd. Reporters shouted questions about oversight failures and civil rights violations. While charges were read, Elijah received confirmation. AJ's case was dismissed. The planted evidence showed clear tampering, and the alleged pills failed basic forensic tests. AJ would be released within the hour. As evening settled over Maple Ridge, Elijah stood on Birchwood Drive, exactly where he'd been forced to kneel weeks ago. The manicured grass felt different under his feet now. He took out his chief's badge, not a symbol of permission anymore, but a promise of accountability. Neighbors emerged from their homes, no longer hiding behind curtains. They watched as patrol cars carried Mercer and Harlan away, the corrupt officers looking suddenly small in the open air. Their power, built on fear and silence, dissolved under community witness. Mrs. Zhang from across the street walked over, the same woman who'd pulled her child away during the kneeling incident. "Chief Grant," she said softly, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up before. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.